Hey everybody, I'm Mike Mavrodakis, and I am a young journalist from the University of Connecticut, and these are my 3 tips on how to avoid some mistakes when you are young in journalism. I've been doing journalism since I was about 14, and I am now almost 21, and these are my 3 tips on how to be a good young journalist. So my first tip is to never be afraid who you reach out to. Never be afraid to reach out to somebody, whether that is a source or somebody in the field, to kind of critique your work and form a connection. First, with a source, they're essential to your story. If you have a specific source in mind, getting that interview will be best for the story because that's what you visualized in the first place. So always go after that first source, even if you don't think you can get them. Always go after it. More often than not, they will say yes, and you will get them in the story. And if they don't say yes, you can kind of badger them until they either decline to comment or don't go in the story. So yeah, and then for the second part of that, asking people within the industry to critique your work and look it over and everything will be very, very important for you to, one, get a job in journalism, or two, just get better at it. Because getting another pair of eyeballs on your work that isn't your typical editor, say at your college newspaper, high school newspaper, or your mom or dad or whoever is looking at your work, or even nobody, is always better than not. And getting information from somebody with professional experience who's worked with professional editors is wildly important. So yeah, and more often than not, people will help you. People will help you, and it'll be a little bit of a boost to your career, both networking-wise and content-wise. All right. Number 2, ask clarifying questions. If you are talking with a source and they bring up an acronym or a topic or a company or a statistic that you don't understand, ask them to clarify it, to describe it for you. Don't pretend that you know more than you do, because in your work, it'll show through if you don't know what you're talking about. It'll be better for your audience, which is the number one priority, and it'll be better for your future knowledge, and it'll make your source trust you more, because they won't think that you are just pretending to be an expert when you're not. Journalists are an mini expert in a lot of fields, but we're not really an expert in anything. So if you don't know something, ask. Your source will appreciate it, and so will your audience. All right, and then tip number 3, use a planner or something that will keep Google Calendar, something that will keep your schedule in order. It will get hectic. You will eventually have a lot of events that you have to go to, or press conferences or something. You will have to talk to a lot of people. You'll have a lot of interviews. Keep a schedule. Make sure that you are relatively organized, so that you know what you're doing, so that you don't feel drowned or burnt out, which is a very, very frequent feeling among young journalists, at least in my experience, myself included. I've experienced periods of burnout. So keeping a schedule, keep a planner, helps you keep your head on straight and helps your content become less rushed, because you have scheduled out time to work on that content. All right, this one kind of goes along with the second tip, is to ask open-ended questions. This is more important than anything, is to ask questions with who, what, when, where, and why. That's it. Why did you do that? If a source says that they didn't pay their taxes, why didn't you pay your taxes? What made you not pay your taxes? Did you forget to pay your taxes? Things like that. It's better for your source to have a clear and concise question, a short question that they can answer easily. Well, maybe not easily, but clearly, which in turn gives you better quotes for your story and gives you better information for your story if they're not just kind of rambling and aimlessly trying to answer the question. Yeah. So just short, concise questions that get right to the point. It doesn't give them room to go around it or avoid your question, because there is really only one answer. And also as a part of that, I'm just now thinking of that, don't ask two-part questions. If you have two questions, ask one, get the response, and then ask another. It'll be better that way. It's another way that they can kind of avoid one of your questions or pick the one that's easiest to answer for them. So one question at a time. All right, so this is the fifth and last point and tip that I have for young journalists. This is pretty important in terms of making your story clear and readable / viewable for an audience to consume. And that is to think about the construction of your story before you report it, before you write it, and before you edit it. So you want to know who you want to talk to, what you want to talk about, what kind of information you're looking for, what records you should look at ahead of time in order to get the best quality interviews. Like I said, you always got to be prepared for interviews. So always know information that you want to talk about in your interviews ahead of time and prepare those questions. But think about the construction of your story ahead of time so you know what you want to tell people and what the audience needs to know. So those are my 5 tips on how to be a better young journalist. I'm Mike Mavrodakis. If you want to reach out to me to get better clarification on any of these tips, or if you want advice on how to be a little bit of a better young journalist, I don't know if I'm going to make more of these. I probably will if I get bored. But yeah, this is how to be a kind of smarter, a little bit wiser, more organized young journalist.